The year was 2472. Above the terraformed planet of Earth Serene, the orbital research station, Cronus, hung like a crystalline spiderweb against the velvet darkness of space. Through the reinforced viewports of Laboratory Theta, Dr. Lam Thun watched as the blue-green world rotated beneath him, its peaceful countenance belying the technological revolution that had swept humanity to the stars. Thang adjusted the calibration on the device before him, a sleek, palm-sized object that pulsed with a soft azure glow. Its internal mechanisms hummed, almost imperceptibly, the nanoscale components working in perfect harmony. This was his life's work, the time dilator. Not a time machine in the classical sense, but something far more subtle and perhaps more profound. A device capable of extending a single biological moment indefinitely. "Final harmonic stabilization complete," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the soft hum of the laboratory equipment. The holographic displays surrounding him flickered with data streams. Quantum calculations, scrolling too quickly for an unaugmented human eye to follow. His assistant, Engineer Mak Vi, looked up from her workstation, her eyes reflecting the blue glow of her own monitors. "Power consumption is optimal, Dr. Than. The quantum entanglement matrix is holding steady at 99.8% efficiency." Thang nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. 5 years of theoretical work, 3 years of practical development, and countless failed prototypes had led to this moment. The time dilator represented a fundamental shift in humanity's relationship with time itself, the ability to extend a single heartbeat into what would subjectively feel like hours, even days. "Are we ready for the first biological test?" he asked. Though he already knew the answer. Every simulation had been perfect, every theoretical model validated. The time dilator worked flawlessly in controlled environments. Vi nodded, her short black hair framing a face marked by both excitement and apprehension. "The cardiac tissue sample is prepared. We'll observe the effect on a single heartbeat cycle, as planned." Than approached the sealed chamber, where the artificially maintained heart tissue pulsed with mechanical regularity. The sample, grown from stem cells rather than harvested, represented the ethical cornerstone of their research. No living being would be subjected to the experimental technology until its safety was absolutely certain. With steady hands, he placed the time dilator adjacent to the tissue chamber and initiated the sequence. The device hummed, its glow intensifying as it established a localized field around the cardiac sample. "Beginning temporal dilation in 3, 2, 1. Vi counted down, her finger hovering over the activation control. The moment she initiated the sequence, everything changed. The cardiac tissue, which had been pulsing with metronomic precision, suddenly froze, not in a state of stoppage, but in a state of extended contraction. The monitoring systems showed that metabolic processes were continuing, but at an infinitesimal rate. A single moment, stretched to its theoretical limit. "It's working," Than whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "We've created an infinite moment." Then, without warning, the laboratory alarms blared to life. The time dilator's glow shifted from azure to crimson, and the readouts spiked in patterns Than had never seen in any of their simulations. "Something's wrong," Vi called out, her fingers flying across her control panel. "The dilation field is expanding beyond the containment parameters. It's affecting the surrounding space." Thang lunged for the emergency shutdown, but before he could reach it, a blinding flash erupted from the device. When his vision cleared, he saw that the time dilator had deactivated itself, but the cardiac tissue remained frozen in its extended moment, unchanged and unresponsive to any external stimuli. "What happened?" he demanded, already running diagnostics. Vi shook her head, bewilderment clear in her expression. "The data doesn't make sense. It's as if..." as if someone altered our baseline quantum algorithms during the test. These patterns, she pointed to jagged lines on her display. They're not random failures. They're deliberate interference patterns. Thon felt a chill run down his spine. Their project was classified at the highest levels. Only a handful of people within the Time Academy even knew the details of their work. If someone had interfered with their experiment, it meant they had not only access to the laboratory systems, but an understanding of the technology that rivaled Thon's own. "Archive everything," he ordered, his voice low and urgent. "Every piece of data from this test, then wipe the system and restore from our secure backup." As Vi carried out his instructions, Thon examined the frozen cardiac tissue more closely. What they had created was unprecedented, a moment suspended not in stasis, but in an infinitely dilated state of existence. The tissue wasn't dead. It was simply experiencing a single instant that, for it, might never end. "Dr. Thon," Vi called, her voice strained. "You need to see this." She had pulled up the security feeds from the laboratory's data core. The timestamps showed access to their systems 3 hours before their test, access that had bypassed every security protocol without triggering a single alarm. "Who could have done this?" Vi whispered. The answer came in the form of a single symbol that flashed briefly across the screen before the security feed cut out entirely. A black sun with tendrils of darkness radiating outward. Thon recognized it immediately, though he had hoped never to see it again. "The black light," he said, the name feeling like ashes in his mouth. "They've found us." The black light was not officially acknowledged by any government or institution. It existed in whispers and rumors among the scientific community, a shadow organization dedicated to acquiring and weaponizing cutting-edge technologies, particularly those related to temporal manipulation. Their existence was dismissed as paranoia by most, but Thon knew better. He had encountered their work before, during his early research at the Time Academy. "We need to inform the Academy immediately," Vi insisted, already reaching for the communication terminal. Than caught her wrist, stopping her. "No, not yet." His mind was racing, calculating possibilities and dangers. "If the black light has infiltrated our systems here, they may have access at the Academy as well. We need to understand what they've done to our prototype first." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of intense activity. Thong and Vi worked without breaks, dissecting the altered algorithms and tracing the infiltration to its source. What they discovered was deeply troubling. The interference hadn't been designed to sabotage their work. It had been an attempt to extract the core technology for a very specific purpose. "They're trying to weaponize it," Thon concluded, staring at the reconstructed code. "They want to create a temporal stasis field that could be deployed against living targets." Vi paled at the implication. "A weapon that could trap a person in a single, endless moment. That's a violation of every ethical principle in temporal physics." Thon finished for her. "And potentially the most humane or inhumane weapon ever created, depending on which moment is dilated." The ethical implications were staggering. A person trapped in a moment of pain would experience eternal suffering. Trapped in a moment of peace, they might experience a form of nirvana. Either way, it represented a fundamental violation of human autonomy and the natural flow of time. As they contemplated this disturbing development, the laboratory's communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Thon activated the display to see the stern face of Dr. Bin, the Time Academy's chief oversight officer. "Dr. Thon," Bin began without preamble, "I've received reports of unusual quantum fluctuations from your laboratory. Explain yourself." Thon hesitated, weighing his options. Bin was known for his bureaucratic adherence to Academy protocols and his skepticism regarding any research that pushed ethical boundaries. Revealing the full truth might result in their project being shut down immediately. "We experienced an unexpected resonance pattern during our latest test," Thon replied carefully. Nothing that threatens station integrity. I assure you, we're analyzing the data now. Bin's eyes narrowed. The Academy Board is concerned about the direction of your research. Dr. Thon, there are those who feel your work on temporal dilation borders on forbidden territory. I'm scheduling a full review of your project for next week. Until then, no further tests are authorized. The communication ended before Thon could respond, leaving him staring at a blank screen. What do we do now? Vi asked, the worry evident in her voice. Thon turned to look at the time dilator, still sitting innocuously on the laboratory bench. We have 1 week to understand what the black light has done, and why, and we need to do it without the Academy discovering the truth. But if the black light is trying to weaponize our research, shouldn't the Academy be informed? In an ideal world, yes, Thon sighed. But the Academy's response would be to shut everything down and lock the research away. Meanwhile, the black light already has enough of our data to continue their work elsewhere. We need to understand the threat before we can counter it. Their investigation led them down an unexpected path. The interference pattern contained encrypted coordinates, a location on Zeta 9, a desolate planet abandoned after failed terraforming attempts decades ago. Its harsh surface, ravaged by constant dust storms and extreme temperature fluctuations, made it the perfect place to conduct secret research away from prying eyes. It's a trap, Vi stated flatly, when Thon suggested they investigate. They want to lure you away from the protection of the station. Possibly, Thon conceded. But it's also our only lead, and if the black light has established a research facility on Zeta 9, we need to know what they're developing. The decision was made more urgent by a disturbing discovery in their laboratory systems. A sleeper program had been activated during the infiltration, one that was systematically corrupting their research data, making subtle alterations that would render any future tests dangerously unstable. Someone doesn't just want our technology, Thon realized. They want to ensure we can't continue our work safely. With the Academy review looming and their data degrading by the hour, Thon made a decision. Prepare the prototype for transport. We're going to Zeta 9. Arranging discreet transportation from the Cronus station required calling in several old favors. Thon had spent decades in the scientific community and had accumulated enough goodwill to secure a small research shuttle without raising immediate alarms. They departed under the pretense of collecting atmospheric samples from Earth Serene's outer stratosphere, a mundane task that wouldn't attract attention. As the shuttle broke orbit and set course for the jump point that would take them to the Zeta system, Vi voiced the concern that had been building since their departure. There's a spy within the Academy, isn't there? Someone working with the black light. Thon nodded grimly. The infiltration was too precise, too knowledgeable. Someone with intimate understanding of our work has betrayed us. The journey to Zeta 9 took 3 days. 3 days of tense silence and furious work as they attempted to salvage what they could of their corrupted research data. The time dilator remained secure in its containment case, a device of immense potential, now at the center of a dangerous game. When they emerged from the final jump point, Zeta 9 loomed before them, a rust-colored world wrapped in swirling dust clouds. Its surface was a wasteland of jagged rock formations and vast, empty plains where the failed terraforming had left behind only the ghosts of what might have been. I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the southern hemisphere, Vi reported as their shuttle entered orbit. Concentrated in what used to be Colony Basin. Colony Basin had been the primary settlement during the terraforming attempt, now abandoned for over 50 years. If someone wanted to establish a hidden facility on this forsaken world, the remnants of the colony would provide the necessary infrastructure. They approached cautiously, using the planet's dust storms as cover. As they descended through the turbulent atmosphere, the shuttle's sensors provided increasingly detailed readings of the energy signature. It's quantum fluctuation patterns, Thon observed, his concern growing. Similar to our time dilator, but with significant modifications. They're generating temporal displacement fields on a scale we never attempted. The shuttle touched down 2 kilometers from the source of the energy signatures, hidden within a deep ravine that offered some protection from the planet's incessant dust storms. Donning environmental suits designed to withstand Zeta-9's harsh conditions, Thong and Vi emerged onto the planet's surface. The landscape that greeted them was bleak and forbidding. Wind-carved rock formations loomed like sentinels, and the red dust swirled around them in hypnotic patterns. Visibility extended barely 50 meters in any direction. The world beyond, lost in the perpetual storm. "We should reach the old colony in about an hour if we maintain this pace," Vi said, consulting the positioning system integrated into her suit. They trudged forward, each step laborious against the strong winds and shifting terrain. The environment itself seemed hostile to their presence, as if the planet rejected these new intruders, just as it had rejected the terraformers decades ago. As they approached the coordinates of the old colony, the storm intensified, reducing visibility to almost nothing. They were forced to rely entirely on their instruments, following a path that existed only as data points on their displays. "Wait!" Thon called suddenly, holding up a hand. "Do you hear that?" Beneath the howling of the wind, there was another sound, a low, rhythmic pulsing that seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath their feet. It was the unmistakable signature of a temporal displacement field, far larger than anything they had ever generated in their laboratory. "It's coming from below us," Vi confirmed, her scanner showing concentrated energy readings emanating from beneath the surface. They followed the readings to what appeared to be an unremarkable expanse of dust-covered ground. Only when they cleared away the accumulated sediment did they discover a maintenance hatch, a relic of the original colony, now repurposed for a darker use. The hatch yielded to Thon's override codes, another indication that someone with Academy clearance was involved in the Black Light's operations. As they descended into the darkness below, the pulsing grew louder, a physical pressure against their ears, even through their environmental helmets. The underground complex was a stark contrast to the desolation above. Clinical white corridors stretched in multiple directions, illuminated by harsh artificial lighting. The air was filtered and temperature-controlled, creating an environment as sterile as any Academy laboratory. "This facility is fully operational," Vi whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "This would have taken years to establish in secret." They moved cautiously through the corridors, following the intensifying pulse of the temporal field. Security systems had been disabled, or more likely, programmed to ignore their presence. Another sign that they were expected. The corridor eventually opened into a vast chamber, dominated by a structure that made Than's blood run cold. At its center stood a temporal accelerator ring, at least 20 meters in diameter, a massive version of the core component in their time dilator. Around it, smaller devices were arranged in a precise geometric pattern, each pulsing with the same crimson glow that had manifested during their failed experiment. "They've replicated our technology," Thon breathed, his mind racing to comprehend the scale of what he was seeing. "But they've modified it for wide-field deployment." "A weapon," Vi confirmed, scanning the apparatus with her instruments. "Designed to create a temporal stasis bubble large enough to engulf an entire city." "Not just a city," came a new voice from behind them. "An entire continent, if necessary." They spun to find themselves facing a tall, gaunt man with piercing blue eyes and silver hair cropped close to his skull. Despite the years that had passed, Thon recognized him immediately. "Dr. Cerelius," he said, unable to keep the shock from his voice. Marcus Cerelius had been Thon's mentor at the Time Academy, a brilliant physicist whose theories on temporal manipulation had formed the foundation of Than's own work. He had disappeared 7 years ago, his research declared classified, and his name gradually erased from Academy publications. "My brightest student," Cerelius acknowledged with a slight inclination of his head. I wondered if you would be clever enough to follow the breadcrumbs I left for you. You're with the Black Light, Thon stated, the betrayal cutting deeper than he had expected. Cerelius smiled thinly. I prefer to think of it as the Black Light being with me. They provide the resources and protection I need to pursue my work without the Academy's stifling ethical constraints. Ethical constraints exist for a reason, Thon countered, gesturing toward the massive apparatus. What you're building here is an abomination, a weapon that violates the most fundamental rights of sentient beings. Is it? Cerelius challenged, stepping closer. Consider the alternative. Conventional weapons that tear bodies apart, that cause suffering and death. My temporal stasis field preserves life in a single, endless moment. No pain, no suffering, no death. Just infinite existence in a fraction of a second. The philosophical implications were dizzying. Cerelius wasn't entirely wrong. A person trapped in temporal stasis wouldn't experience suffering in the conventional sense. They would exist in a single moment of consciousness. Theoretically, forever. And who decides which moment is preserved? Thon demanded. Who chooses which populations are subjected to this mercy? You're talking about removing people's autonomy, their ability to experience the flow of time itself. Cerelius waved a dismissive hand. Philosophical objections from a man who developed the very technology I'm using. Your time dilator does precisely what my device does, just on a smaller scale. The only difference is application. Intent matters, Vi interjected fiercely. Dr. Thon created the time dilator to save lives, to extend critical moments during medical emergencies, to give doctors more time to intervene when seconds count. And I will save lives on a grand scale, Cerelius countered. Imagine war rendered obsolete because the aggressor knows their entire army could be frozen in a moment of time. Imagine terrorist threats neutralized before a single person is harmed. Thon shook his head, recognizing the dangerous logic that had corrupted his former mentor. You're describing a temporal arms race. Once this technology exists as a weapon, every power will seek to possess it. And eventually, someone will use it, not just as a deterrent, but as an actual weapon of mass temporal displacement. Cerelius's expression hardened. That's why the Black Light must be the only organization to possess this capability. We will maintain the balance of power until someone offers you more resources, more freedom. Thon said quietly. There's always a higher bidder. Cerelius. Something flickered in the older scientist's eyes, perhaps a moment of doubt, quickly suppressed. Enough debate. I didn't bring you here to convince you. I brought you here because I need your prototype. Your time dilator contains refinements my team hasn't been able to replicate. You infiltrated our laboratory, Vi accused. You already stole our data. I acquired enough to build this. Cerelius gestured to the massive apparatus around them. But your latest version has solved the quantum entanglement stability issue that still plagues my design. With your prototype, I can complete my work. Thon's hand moved instinctively to the secure case attached to his environmental suit, the case containing the time dilator. I won't give it to you, he stated firmly. Cerelius sighed, as if disappointed by a student's poor performance. I had hoped you would see the bigger picture. Then, that you would join me voluntarily, but I am prepared for your refusal. He made a subtle gesture, and from the shadows of the chamber emerged 4 figures in combat armor, weapons trained on Than and Vi. The prototype, please. Cerelius extended his hand. Or my associates will be forced to take more drastic measures. Thon's mind raced, searching for options. The chamber offered no immediate escape routes, and they were clearly outmatched in terms of firepower. Yet, surrendering the time dilator would provide Cerelius with the final component he needed to create a weapon of unprecedented power. In that moment of indecision, Vi acted with lightning speed. She drew a small device from her suit pocket and hurled it toward the temporal accelerator ring. The device detonated in a flash of brilliant light, sending cascading failures through the delicate equipment. Chaos erupted in the chamber. The guards opened fire, energy bolts sizzling through the air as Thon and Vi dove for cover behind a bank of equipment. The temporal accelerator ring began to emit a high-pitched whine as its systems destabilized, the crimson glow fluctuating wildly. "You fools!" Cerelius shouted over the growing cacophony. "The containment field is failing. The temporal displacement will—" His words were cut off as a shockwave of distorted time erupted from the damaged accelerator. Thong watched in horror as one of the guards was caught in the wave, his movements slowing to an imperceptible crawl, then stopping entirely, frozen in a moment that might never end for him. "We need to get out of here now," Thon urged, pulling Vi toward a service corridor they had passed earlier. "The entire system is collapsing." They fled through the underground complex as alarms blared and emergency containment protocols activated automatically. Behind them, the temporal displacement continued to spread, consuming everything in its path with relentless precision. When they reached the surface, the storm had intensified to near hurricane levels, the wind howling like a living entity in pain. Their shuttle was barely visible through the swirling dust, a dim outline 2 kilometers away. "We'll never make it before the displacement field reaches the surface," Vi shouted over the storm, her voice tinged with desperation. Than looked down at the secure case containing the time dilator. "Yes, we will." He extracted the device, its azure glow a stark contrast to the angry red of Cerelius's corrupted technology. With practiced movements, he reconfigured the settings, pushing the prototype beyond its tested parameters. "What are you doing?" Vi demanded, her eyes wide with alarm. "Creating a counterfield," Thon explained, his fingers flying over the controls. "If I can generate a stable temporal bubble around us, it should protect us from the expanding displacement wave." It was a desperate gamble, one that violated several principles of temporal physics. But in that moment, theory gave way to necessity. "When I activate this, we'll experience subjective time acceleration," he warned Vi. "The journey to the shuttle will seem to take only seconds for us, while the displacement field will appear to move in extreme slow motion." "Will it work?" Vi asked, trust and fear mingling in her expression. Thun met her gaze through their helmet visors. "Theoretically." Without further hesitation, he activated the time dilator. The world around them seemed to slow, almost to a standstill, the swirling dust particles hanging suspended in the air. In the distance, they could see the temporal displacement field emerging from the underground facility, a wave of distorted reality creeping across the landscape with glacial slowness from their perspective. "Run!" Thon commanded, and they sprinted toward the shuttle, moving through the frozen storm like ghosts through time itself. They reached the shuttle in what felt like moments, though Thon's chronometer indicated that nearly 30 minutes had passed in objective time. As they sealed the shuttle's hatch behind them, he deactivated the time dilator, returning them to normal temporal flow. The ship's systems came online just as the displacement field reached their position. Through the viewports, they could see the wave washing over the shuttle's hull, the temporal energies dissipating against the craft's shielding. "Get us out of here," Thon ordered, strapping himself into the co-pilot's seat as Vi took the controls. The shuttle rose shakily through the storm, fighting against both the natural tempest and the unnatural temporal distortions that rippled outward from the collapsing facility. By the time they reached orbit, the southern hemisphere of Zeta 9 was enveloped in a spreading stain of altered time, a wound in reality that might never heal. As they plotted a course back to the Cronus station, Vi finally asked the question that had been building since their escape. "What happens now? The Academy will demand explanations for our unauthorized departure, and the Black Light will be looking for us," Thon finished grimly. "Cerelius may have survived. Even if he didn't, the organization he serves won't abandon their pursuit of this technology." He looked down at the time dilator, now safely powered down in its containment case. Such a small device to cause so much turmoil. We can't return to Cronus, he decided. Not yet. The Academy has been compromised. We don't know how deeply the black light has infiltrated. If we reveal what we've discovered without knowing who to trust, we'll be placing the time dilator directly in their hands. The return journey was tense, filled with careful calculations and difficult decisions. Instead of heading directly to the Cronus station, they altered course for a remote outpost on the fringes of settled space, a place where Thon had connections from his early research days, before joining the Academy. 3 days later, as they approached the outpost, an urgent communication broke through their self-imposed communications blackout. It was a general alert, broadcast on all emergency frequencies throughout the system. Attention all vessels. The Cronus Research Station has experienced a critical temporal anomaly. Approach with extreme caution. Temporal distortions detected in surrounding space. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Thon and Vi exchanged horrified glances. They wouldn't, Vi whispered. Even the black light wouldn't attack a research station filled with civilians. But the evidence suggested otherwise. The alert was followed by fragmented data bursts, showing the Cronus station enveloped in rippling waves of distorted space-time, the unmistakable signature of a temporal weapon. They're testing their technology, Thon realized, a cold dread settling in his stomach. Using the station as a live experiment. Without discussion, they altered course again, pushing the shuttle's engines beyond safe parameters to reach Cronus as quickly as possible. The journey that should have taken days was compressed into hours through a series of dangerous jump point calculations that risked tearing their small craft apart. When they finally emerged near Earth Serene, the sight that greeted them defied comprehension. The Cronus station still orbited the planet, but it was surrounded by a shimmering bubble of altered space-time. Within that bubble, movement had slowed to an imperceptible crawl, the station itself appearing frozen against the backdrop of stars. They've dilated time around the entire station, Thon breathed, the implications staggering. Everyone aboard is experiencing time at a fraction of normal flow. Their shuttle's sensors confirmed his assessment. For those trapped within the temporal bubble, a single second of subjective time would take years to pass by normal measurement. They weren't dead. They were suspended in a moment that stretched toward infinity. Can we reverse it? Vi asked, her voice barely audible. Thon studied the readings, his mind racing through calculations and possibilities. Not directly, but we might be able to create a counter-resonance using the time dilator. If we can match the frequency of their field, but invert the phase. It was theoretical work at best, never tested outside of simulations. But as he looked at the frozen station, at the thousands of lives suspended in a single moment, Thon knew they had no choice but to try. They approached cautiously, staying beyond the boundary of the temporal bubble, using the shuttle's limited scientific equipment. Thon modified the time dilator once more, pushing the prototype far beyond its design parameters. If this works, he explained to Vi, it will create a cascading resonance that should disrupt the temporal field. But there's a significant risk. What kind of risk? She asked, though her determined expression suggested the answer wouldn't change her resolve. The counter-resonance could tear the fabric of space-time around the station. In the worst case, it might create a temporal fracture that could spread outward, affecting Earth Serene itself. The weight of the decision pressed down on them both. Thousands of lives hung in the balance, with the potential for many more to be affected if their attempt failed catastrophically. We have to try, Vi said simply. Thon nodded, making the final adjustments to the time dilator. The shuttle systems aren't powerful enough to generate the field we need. I'll have to take the device closer to the bubble boundary, close enough for the fields to interact directly. That means spacewalking into a temporal distortion zone, Vi pointed out, alarm evident in her voice. The risk to you personally. Is necessary, Thon finished firmly. There's no other way to position the device with sufficient precision. The preparations for the spacewalk were conducted in tense silence. As Thon donned the shuttle's single EVA suit, Vi programmed the necessary trajectories and monitored the increasingly unstable temporal bubble surrounding the station. The field is fluctuating, she reported, as Thon prepared to exit through the airlock. The Black Light's technology isn't as stable as ours. There are micro-ruptures forming along the southern quadrant of the bubble. That gives us an opportunity, Thon replied, securing the time dilator to his suit. I'll target the largest fluctuation point. It should provide the path of least resistance for our counterfield. As the airlock cycled and the outer door opened to the vacuum of space, Thon took a moment to absorb the surreal beauty of the scene before him. The frozen Cronus station gleamed in the light of the distant sun, the temporal bubble surrounding it, creating prismatic distortions that bent starlight into impossible patterns. Using the suit's maneuvering thrusters, he propelled himself toward the boundary of the bubble. The time dilator clutched securely in his gloved hand. Through his helmet comm, he could hear Vi's steady voice providing guidance. You're approaching the optimal insertion point. 20 meters? 15? 10. As he neared the boundary, Thon could feel the subtle pull of the temporal distortion, a strange sensation that seemed to tug at his very atoms, urging them to sync with the dilated time within the bubble. I'm in position, he reported, coming to a halt just outside the visible distortion. Activating the time dilator now. With precise movements, he initiated the counter-resonance sequence. The device in his hands hummed to life, its azure glow intensifying until it rivaled the stars around him. As the counterfield began to form, Thon could feel the vibrations through his suit, a physical manifestation of the temporal energies being manipulated. It's working, Vi's excited voice came through the comm. The bubble is responding to the counter-resonance. Fluctuation patterns are increasing exponentially. Thon watched as ripples spread across the surface of the temporal bubble, the perfect sphere beginning to distort and warp as the competing fields interacted. It was working, but not quickly enough. At this rate, it would take hours for the field to fully dissipate, hours they didn't have before the black light would detect their interference and respond. I need to amplify the effect, he decided, making a calculation that was equal parts science and instinct. I'm going to modify the phase variance to create a harmonic cascade. No! Vi's voice was sharp with alarm. The simulations never supported that approach. The potential for catastrophic failure is a risk we have to take, he cut her off, already making the adjustments to the device. Trust me, Vi. With a silent prayer to whatever forces might govern the universe, Thon activated the modified sequence. The time dilator's glow shifted from azure to a brilliant white, so intense it would have blinded him without his helmet's automatic filters. The effect on the temporal bubble was immediate and dramatic. The ripples became waves, then violent convulsions as the counterfield attacked the very structure of the dilated time zone. Cracks appeared in the bubble, not physical fractures, but tears in the fabric of time itself, leaking normal temporal flow back into the affected area. Through these ruptures, Thon could see movement returning to the station, slow at first, then gradually accelerating as more of the bubble collapsed. Emergency lights flashed as systems came back online, and figures could be seen moving inside the previously frozen structure. It's working! Vi's jubilant voice filled his helmet. Station systems are reactivating, life signs returning to normal parameters. But even as the temporal bubble around Cronus disintegrated, Thon noticed a new and more alarming development. The time dilator in his hands was beginning to destabilize, its brilliant glow fluctuating wildly as the power output exceeded its designed limits. The prototype is overloading, he reported tensely. Containment fields are failing. Get back to the shuttle now, Vi commanded, fear evident in her voice. Thon knew he couldn't. If the time dilator detonated while he was returning to the shuttle, Both he and Vi would be caught in the resulting temporal explosion. And if he simply released it to drift in space, the uncontrolled release of energy could create an even larger temporal distortion. There was only one option. Vi, he said, his voice calm despite the crisis. I need you to move the shuttle to a safe distance. Immediately. I'm not leaving you out there, she protested. You have to... What I'm about to do... He took a deep breath, watching as the time dilator's containment field began to visibly fracture. I'm going to create a controlled implosion. Direct the energy inward instead of outward. But I need to be precise, and I need you to be safe. There was a moment of silence on the comm, and Thon could almost see Vi's internal struggle. There has to be another way, she said finally, her voice breaking. There isn't. Not with the time we have. The irony wasn't lost on him, a temporal physicist running out of time. Please, Vi, trust me one more time. After another agonizing pause, he heard the shuttle's engines engaging, the small craft beginning to move away from his position. I'm monitoring from maximum sensor range. Vi's voice came through, professional once more despite the emotion he knew she must be feeling. What's your plan? Working quickly. Thang reconfigured the time dilator one final time. What he was attempting had never been done before, creating a self-contained temporal loop that would channel the device's energy into itself rather than allowing it to expand outward. I'm inverting the field geometry, he explained, his fingers moving with practiced precision despite the bulky gloves of his EVA suit, creating a closed temporal circuit that should contain the release of energy within its own loop. As the time dilator's destabilization accelerated, Thon completed the final adjustments. The device now pulsed with a rhythm that matched his own heartbeat, a synchronization he had programmed deliberately, tying the temporal field to his biological rhythms. It's done, he reported, watching as the fractures in the containment field spread like spiderwebs across the device's surface. The implosion will begin in approximately 30 seconds. And then what happens? Vi asked, the question hanging between them like a physical presence. Thon had no answer he wanted to give her. The truth was that he didn't know exactly what would happen to him. The best-case scenario was that he would be caught in the temporal implosion but protected by the specific resonance frequency he had programmed. The worst case. Just make sure the Academy gets the complete record of what happened here, he said instead. They need to know about the black light, about Cerelius, about the weaponization attempt. Make sure this technology is protected from those who would misuse it. I will, Vi promised, her voice steady despite everything. But you should be the one to tell them yourself. The time dilator gave a high-pitched whine as its systems reached critical failure. Brilliant light spilled from the fractures in its casing, illuminating Than's suit in stark white radiance. Implosion imminent, he reported calmly. Remember what we discovered. Vi, time isn't just a dimension to be measured or manipulated. It's the space between heartbeats where life actually happens. As the final seconds counted down, Thon closed his eyes and focused on his breathing, on the rhythm of his heart. If these were to be his last moments, he wanted to experience them fully, without fear or regret. The time dilator detonated in a silent explosion of light and energy. From the shuttle, Vi watched in horror as the space around Than seemed to fold inward, collapsing into a singularity of pure temporal energy. For a brief moment, his suited figure was illuminated in impossible clarity, every detail visible as if frozen in perfect focus. Then, the light imploded, drawing inward until nothing remained but a small, pulsing point of azure brilliance, a star born of time itself. Thang! Vi called over the comm, but there was no response. The EVA suit's life signs monitor had gone silent, not registering death, but simply absence. As the shuttle's sensors struggled to make sense of what they were detecting, Vi realized that the point of light was not disappearing. It remained, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed hauntingly familiar. The rhythm of a human heartbeat. In the days that followed, the Cronus station returned to full operational status. The thousands who had been trapped in the temporal bubble had no memory of their experience. For them, no time had passed at all. One moment they had been going about their duties. The next, they were being told that they had been saved from a temporal weapon deployed by an organization most had never heard of. Dr. Anbin and the Time Academy launched a full investigation, spurred by the evidence Vi provided from their journey to Zeta 9 and the attack on the station. The Black Light's existence could no longer be denied, and resources were mobilized to counter the threat they posed. Cerelius was never found. The temporal displacement that had engulfed the southern hemisphere of Zeta 9 made recovery operations impossible. Whether he had escaped or been consumed by his own technology remained unknown. As for Than, extensive search efforts yielded no trace of his body or his EVA suit. The point of light that had formed during the implosion continued to exist, defying all attempts at scientific classification. It pulsed with perfect regularity, maintaining the exact rhythm of a human heart. Some of the more mystically inclined scientists suggested that Than hadn't died at all, that he had been caught in his own temporal loop, experiencing a single moment stretched to infinity. Others dismissed this as sentimental wishful thinking, insisting that he had been atomized in the implosion, and the pulsing light was merely a stable temporal anomaly. Nothing more. Vi chose to believe otherwise. 1 month after the events at Cronus, she stood in a small, secure laboratory deep within the Time Academy's central research facility on Earth Serene. Before her, contained within the most advanced isolation field technology could create, floated the pulsing point of azure light, now officially designated the Than phenomenon in Academy records. She had been appointed head of a new division dedicated to understanding and protecting against temporal weapons. The research that she and Than had conducted would continue, but under strict ethical guidelines and with multiple layers of oversight to prevent misuse. As she prepared to leave for the day, Vi approached the containment field one last time. The pulsing light seemed to brighten slightly as she drew near, though the instruments registered no measurable change. "I don't know if you can hear me," she said softly, feeling somewhat foolish but needing to say the words nonetheless. "But we've secured the technology. The Academy has acknowledged the threat and is taking action. Your work will continue, but only for its original purpose, to help, not to harm." The light pulsed steadily, its rhythm unchanged. "I've been thinking about what you said," she continued. "About time being the space between heartbeats. I think I understand now. Each moment contains infinite potential, infinite experience, if we only knew how to perceive it that way." She placed her hand against the outer shield of the containment field, as close as she could get to the pulsing light. "Whether you're gone or just elsewhere, thank you. For everything." As she turned to leave, she thought, just for an instant, that the rhythm of the pulses changed, accelerating briefly before returning to its steady beat. The instruments recorded no variation, and she told herself it was merely her imagination, her hope manifesting as perceived reality. But as she sealed the laboratory behind her, Vi smiled nonetheless. In a universe where time itself could be manipulated, where moments could be stretched to infinity, and consciousness could potentially exist in the space between heartbeats, who was to say what was truly impossible? The research would continue. The vigilance against those who would weaponize such knowledge would never cease. But neither would the wonder and the potential of what they had discovered, the infinite moment that existed in the void between heartbeats, where time and consciousness met in ways science was only beginning to understand. And somewhere, in that infinite moment, perhaps Than still existed, exploring the ultimate frontier, not of space, but of time itself.